Welcome to Progress in San Diego, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I'm your host, Walter Davis. And this evening we have a representative from the National Coalition for Men, and it's Mr. Harry Croutch. And you are the president of the San Diego chapter, is that not correct?
And the national organization.
And the national organization as
That's
well.
Correct.
Now, tell me about that. Tell me about the National Coalition for Men.
NCFM is the oldest men's rights organization in the world that we know of. We were founded in upstate New York in 1977. We have members throughout the United States and several countries. Basically we're committed to the eradication or elimination of harmful gender-based stereotypes, particularly as they adversely impact men and boys. We basically serve men, their children, their families, and the women that love them. And we do have a number of women in our organization. As a matter of fact, our national treasurer is based down in Dallas-Fort Worth, and she used to be the president of the local chapter of the National Organization of Women.
Well, tell me about that. Why would a woman be a member of an organization like that?
Oh, there's lots of reasons. Mothers have sons. Because of a number of problems associated with gender discrimination in our society, many mothers or sisters or aunts or grandmothers who love their children, male and female, because they're both adversely impacted by the gender discrimination, are interested in some of the things we do.
Give me some examples. When you say gender discrimination, give me some examples of that, please.
Well, probably the easiest one, or the easiest one to understand, would be selective service. Young men are required to sign up under threat of imprisonment and loss of benefits by the age of 18, and young women are not. A lot of people think the National Coalition for Men is analogous to a father's rights organization, which we are not. That does not mean we're not concerned with issues that adversely impact fathers. We certainly are, but our interests are much, much broader. Of interest now, for instance, genital mutilation. We seldom talk about circumcision, though it's an extraordinarily complicated and interesting topic. And basically it boils down, should a young baby, male or female, have their genitals mutilated. In the United States of America, there's a federal law that prevents it from gender mutilation of females at any age. With threat of imprisonment, long terms of imprisonment. There's no such protection for young men.
Okay.
There's an endless list.
Give me some more examples.
Well, of particular concern to us are false accusations, because they impact so many people in so many facets of life. And they come in many, many forms, and I'm not talking necessarily, first we have to associate, there's criminal courts, civil courts, family courts, dependency courts for children, juveniles, that sort of thing. And we find false accusations in all these areas that adversely impact families. False accusations of domestic violence, child abuse, sexual assault, and even paternity, formerly known, most often known as paternity fraud, surface all the time. In fact, the supervising judge of family court in her chambers has told me twice that everybody lies in family court. Well, that's kind of interesting, because we're trying to encourage the prosecution of people who make false accusations, under the belief that if people were held accountable for making false accusations, they might actually stop, or certainly diminish a great deal, because people would know there's a consequence. I believe the state of West Virginia just this week passed legislation, I don't think it's been signed by the governor, but passed legislation to criminalize false accusations of domestic violence. They made it a misdemeanor charge. That's a start. And in the county of San Diego, there hasn't been one person prosecuted for making a false accusation in family court, ever. Judges are empowered to issue sanctions against false accusers. They seldom do. I'll give you a great example. I'm associated with an attorney who has a client who for months and months and months was falsely accused of stalking, breaking and entering into the mother of their son's home, doing all sorts of things. Finally, he went out and paid $1,000 and rented the service that comes with a GPS ankle bracelet. And it was tracked by satellite, and all the information is in the computer. They went to court for a hearing, and in this case, the mother got up and reiterated all the falsehoods that she had created. This man had been imprisoned, lost his job, spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to extricate himself from these false accusations, had been prevented from seeing his son because the court was laboring under the belief that he was an abusive person, when in fact it was the mother. And so when the mother had reiterated all the lies under oath, our attorney put the father, on the stand. And of course he denied everything. And then the attorney asked him to pull up his pant leg, showed everybody the GPS bracelet, looked at the judge and said, "Your Honor, here's the passwords, take a look at the website." The judge did, became quite incensed over what had happened, awarded custody to the father. But you know what sanctions were leveled against the mother? None.
So what I'm hearing basically from your message is, obviously there's a lot of domestic violence against women, and there have been some terrible things. There's a history of terrible things happening to women, you know, throughout history. But what I'm saying, what I'm hearing you say rather, is in some areas it's gone too far in terms of retribution or the way that men are being punished. Is that not part of what you're saying?
Well, that's certainly part of what I'm saying. But there's reasons for that. I don't know if we're going to get into them all here, but there's certainly reasons for that. Most of them are political. There is a concerted effort. There has been a concerted effort, oh gosh, since maybe the late 60s, mid 60s, to pretty much, well, you hear about it, male bashing, deadbeat dads, look at television, sitcom situations where...
And that's an important fact. I mean, you see men getting kicked in the genitals, and that's
Exactly.
very funny, but you don't see that
funny.
happening to women necessarily on sitcoms and television programs.
Exactly,
like that.
exactly. Well, let me give you an example of the power. Do you remember the Rihanna-Chris Brown affair? Mm-hmm. You know, when that was over, the initial press had it that Rihanna had attacked Chris Brown in the vehicle viciously before Chris Brown overreacted and beat up Rihanna. For the next 24 or so hours, what we heard in the press was iterations about Rihanna actually being the instigator, the perpetrator of the domestic violence, the one causing it. She could have caused a wreck on the roads, people could have been killed, all sorts of things. The day after the first day, all that stopped. It just came to a screeching halt. And all of a sudden, Chris Brown was on national radio, national television, taking responsibilities for his own actions. Rihanna was going on Oprah and all these talk shows as the poster child for domestic violence, with no mention of her involvement as the aggressor or the perpetrator. When I mentioned earlier this powerful political movement, one has to, in my business, one has to stop and say, how does that happen? You know, how do the people in that movement get to people like Chris Brown and Rihanna that fast and shut them up? Because that's what happened. Or we can talk Tiger Woods. You know, when Tiger Woods ended up in the tree, the reports were all over the place for days and days and days, speculation about whether Elaine was there with a golf club trying to rescue him or kill him. The suspicions still rage, and this morning Tiger publicly went on to the world and basically gave an apology for his behavior as a sex addict. But there's no follow-up with respect to the violence that may have been perpetrated against him, and do we really know the truth? I suspect not. When we talk about discrimination against men, I mean, some things are so clear-cut to people like I, this is what we do. Look at Gloria Allred, the famous feminist attorney who jumped up several days after Tiger ruined the tree, and all of a sudden all these women start coming out of the woodwork, and she's representing them, all these women that have had affairs with Tiger Woods, They're now starlets, they're TV stars. They're somehow heroines, yet in fact, they were just as much an adulteress as was Tiger. But we don't look at them that way. We only see Tiger Woods as the one who caused all this. And certainly that's far from the truth, because in fact what we have is some gold diggers out there who are interested in many, many things other than Tiger as a man.
So in all fairness, this is a systemic and societal problem.
That's correct.
Because in that same token, a lot of men are looked up to and admired. They have a lot of women. Yet a woman is looked down upon if she has a lot of men. So what I'm hearing is that we have some well entrenched things in terms of how we look at each other in this society. Now, when you talk about these false accusations and discrimination against men, do you see an effect on marriages and families?
No, heavens, yes. The vast majority of false accusations of domestic violence and child abuse and some sexual assault are made within days of a court hearing in family court. The incidence of false accusation in family court has been reported to be over 100 times the rate in criminal court. That's significant. The false accusations that we find, and both men and women file them, by the way, but here's the only number we really need to know about discrimination in family court. Throughout the United States, if not the westernized world, in 9 out of 10 custody cases, primary or sole custody is given to the mother, regardless of whether they're the best parent. 9 out of 10 times. One doesn't really need to know, one can't debate once they know that whether there's gender discrimination in family court. One of the weapons primarily used by mothers are false accusations. They're not exclusive to mothers, but primarily used by mothers are false accusations. In highly contested divorce cases, which I think is fascinating as well as horrendously sad for our society, in my opinion, based on my experience and a number of experts, what we find is a high instance of mental instability in high contest conflict cases. Usually, what we'll find is a parent who has the characteristics in the psychiatric Bible, DSM-4, of what's known as a borderline personality disorder, or, in my world, a pissed off Wolverine on steroids. They think differently, they act differently. Most of those individuals have issues of abandonment, probably sexual assault when they were a child, other forms of abuse. Could be some physiological damage to the impulse control mechanism in the brain. Whatever the reasons are, they're extremely manipulative, not from their view, but from everybody else's view. And they generate a lot of the false accusations. If that's true, which I believe it to be, then what we really have is a mental health issue, not a criminal one, and certainly not one that can be resolved in family court, and certainly not one that can be resolved in the best interest of children by making sure that the mother still has custody of those kids.
So let's stop at that point. I mean, it appears as though our management of mental illness throughout our society is inappropriate. We're seeing instances where people are being incarcerated for drug addiction as opposed to getting treatment. And so what I'm hearing is another part of that, where perhaps people are testifying falsely in court, but their mental agility is not being in question.
No, actually, excuse me.
Oh, okay.
That's almost accurate. Mm-hmm. But I have actually been in court and heard a judge say, excuse me, okay, I understand that we actually have a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder in the mother. That does not necessarily mean she's not a good parent.
Okay.
I mean, you just shake your head like how this person gets seated on the bench. Unfortunately, a lot of the judges have absolutely no experience in family court, have no experience or training in child psychology, no experience or training in issues of family counseling or family dynamics. Any training they may have had, it might be some cursory training with respect to the domestic violence industry, for example.
So you're saying that because of a lack of experience and exposure and training, that some of the judges could be making inappropriate decisions from the bench?
Are making inappropriate every day, all the time, throughout the United States, horrendous decisions.
Sure. Now, obviously, this is having an impact on the current trends that we see in terms of divorces, people not getting married, children being married out of wedlock. So these particular influences ripple through the society. Would you not say that's true in terms of damaging effects?
Well, absolutely. Where do we want to start with that one? Let's just take the state of California. State of California, there's approximately 122,000 live births every year. 82,000 of those are out of wedlock. So we know that a high instance of those situations of out of wedlock births, as well as the ones that are even married or have partners, we find a high instance of paternity fraud in those situations. So from that standpoint, where's the family? We have situations. I just talked to I got a call today, for example, from a lady who was concerned about her husband, who has been accused by another woman of fathering their child, of 13, who's 13 years old. He finally finds out that that's not his child. They don't have an established relationship. They live thousands of miles apart. The daughter and he very rarely communicate. The court will not let him out of paternity. Why? Well, there's a lot of reasons. One of which is the Department of Child Support Services makes money off of collecting those dollars from this man. They get federal incentives from the federal government. It's roughly $1.98 for every dollar they collect. Okay. Now, how does, the question is, how does that impact our family? In general, there are over 32 major social ills that can directly be attributed to squeaky microphones and to fatherlessness in the homes. In the black community, it's higher than in other communities. And what happened there was 1989 welfare, I think it was 89, when they came out with a Welfare Act and basically drove fathers out of the home for anybody to collect any money for welfare. That began that trend. And if you also look at that, you'll find that's when gangs really started taking off, because young boys still needed that father influence. They needed the influence of, so they went and found male influence wherever they could find it, and it turned out to be gangs. So we drove families apart, beginning just before 1990 through the Welfare Act. That has continued. The trend has continued. Then we made divorce easier. First, no-fault divorce was in California in 1972. Other states have now adopted it. And now one doesn't need a reason to file for divorce. As a matter of fact, adultery is not even a word you can find in family court. They don't care, okay? You can be sleeping with a sheep next door if you're a farmer, and if you go through a divorce, they don't care. And it's perfectly okay if you sleep with sheep, but you can still be a good parent to your children. They don't care. I find that extraordinary. We find that because of this political movement I talked about and the influence of this political movement, the fact, let me give you an example. There's 635 women's studies programs in the United States. There's conceivably 4 that could be almost construed as a men's studies program. There's over 250 women's commissions in the United States of America. There's 4 that might be construed as a men's commission, one of which was started by the National Coalition for Men members in New Hampshire a few years back. The governor did not want to create the commission. In fact, at that time, the governor tried to stack the commission with radical feminists so they would control the nature of information about men's health. This movement is extraordinarily powerful. Obama's health plan that's been proposed on the table, regardless of whether one supports or doesn't support universal health care, the program on the table establishes 10 more women's commissions and not 1 for men's health.
Which is a very interesting thing. I know a lot of men that have to go to Los Angeles in terms of getting help for cancer.
Yes.
We don't see prostate cancer walks and things of that
correct.
nature with blue ribbons, but everybody's familiar with the pink ribbon that they have for breast cancer. So certainly the other parts of that are how many clinics do we have for rape for men, and men get raped?
None.
And so I have sent my clients into rape clinics when I realized that a man had been raped and they've been arrested for showing up
That's correct.
at a woman's rape clinic.
That's correct. Not only that, do you remember the Duke lacrosse rape case? And what was her name? Crystal White Magnum, who was the young lady who was an exotic dancer who accused virtually the lacrosse team of raping her, at least 3 to 5 men there. that whole scandal brought down the district attorney, the coach, the team, all sorts of things, all sorts of damage from all those false accusations. It all kind of hinged, though, when she went to the rape clinic. Okay? It turns out the tests that were thought to have been given were not. The evidence that was supposed to have been collected wasn't collected. The list is endless, endless. And it boils down to the fact that the nurse who was supposedly involved in this had been educated with respect to the radical feminism that drives the organizations. And by the way, the rape clinic started in about 1972, and I can talk about that if you want. But she was so indoctrinated with this belief system, and it boils down to this: women and children don't lie. That's the belief system. Whatever they say is supposed to be taken at face value. So extraordinary is this, that there was an entire domestic violence council organization, I believe in Virginia. It was Virginia. Yeah, Virginia, which last year a judge basically closed down because they absolutely refused to accept within their organizations other organizations that were gender inclusive and gender neutral, and had begun to learn that domestic violence is not always perpetrated by men, and women are not always the victims. And by the way, all the evidence, all the reliable statistics says it's about 50-50.
Okay, and that's something that we don't hear about as often, is violence perpetrated against men. And also it appears that men don't stand up or make noise for themselves and stand up for their rights. So men have to start standing up for their rights. But more so, what we need is for people to stand up for justice.
That's correct.
I'm not hearing very much conversation about equality and fairness. I'm hearing a lot about women's rights, but not about gender equality.
That's correct.
And perhaps with your movement, we can shift more towards that. As you said, it's hurting mothers, it is hurting, with their sons, it is hurting everybody. It's destroying families, and so there needs to be a appreciation very similar to what we have in drug court now, where there's harm reduction.
That's correct.
So we need to start having judgments made in family court that embrace the concept of harm reduction, as opposed to destroying one parent or another. And there's a lot of very tricky language. I remember a thing called liberal visitation, which basically meant that you had to get permission from your spouse. You didn't get a specific date to see your child, but you had to call 48 hours in advance before you could go and see your kid, et cetera, which meant if they didn't get that call in 48 hours, you didn't get to see your kid. So the first time I heard liberal visitation, I thought, okay, well, that sounds pretty good, but it's actually cloaked, it's disguised, and people are facing bankruptcy.
All the time.
And people are living in the street, they're homeless.
And committing suicide.
Committing suicide, we have suicidal things. A lot of our armed forces members are being affected, and women included. I understand now
that's correct.
That women are facing a 50% increase in divorces, the ones that are serving in the military that are coming back. And so they are serving in California, yet they may be facing a custody battle in Virginia, so they don't have any protection, male and female, don't have any protection by the federal government, even though they're serving in the federal government.
There is some change. There's been some change in the regulations, thanks to basically a lobbyist up in Sacramento. His name is Michael Robinson. And he was able to work with a number of people, not just in California, but elsewhere, to affect some legislation, reform legislation with respect to veterans and protecting their rights when they were on extended periods of duty overseas.
We're coming down to our last 3 minutes. What is the message you want to leave with the public? What do you want to tell the public? Very important.
That we all bleed. The pain that men experience can be, and is, and often is more so, than the pain that the women involved with them experience. And that doesn't really matter. Numbers don't matter. Who does what to whom, how many times, or most. What matters is that people are hurt, they're harmed. Our children's futures are being horrendously disrupted. And the problems that we're going to face in the next 10 years because of our inability to protect our families and our seeming desire to destroy them will tear us apart.
Harry, I really appreciate you coming on. We're going to have you back again. We never have enough time
Thank you.
To get through everything. And I want to encourage the audience to come to our website. We'll have more information about the National Coalition for Men and how you can get involved with that, how you can attend some of the meetings and get more information in terms of how these various factors are affecting the American family. We have some very irresponsible things occurring and then very unjust things happening in our court system, and through unity we can affect a change, and that's what we're all about here with the Community Coalition. I want to thank my crew for volunteering to come out. We have people from all walks of life here behind the camera. I want to encourage you to join the San Diego County Community Coalition and watch our other television shows. We come on at 5:00 p.m. Every Sunday, again at 6 p.m. with the Lee Smith Cooper's show, Community Issues, A Tapestry of Concern, and Laura Thompson's show, The Community Artist Connection. We also have 2 other shows in production right now that'll be on the air very soon. You're welcome to come out and join our audience, and also to be a volunteer and be a member of our crew and learn how to operate your own television show. And we also webcast live on the internet. That information is also on our website, and you can interact with us live. You can chat with us live during our broadcast, as we're doing these monthly. We're currently recording 10 shows per month. I want to thank you for coming aboard, and Harry, I want to thank you for coming out again, sir.
Thank
I really
you,
appreciate you, and you always have good information. Thank you very much for joining us, and please come back again next week for another story. We have very exciting stories coming up. We focus on positive news and positive people. My name is Walter Davis, and I'm your host. Thank you very much for joining Progress in San Diego, ordinary people doing extraordinary things.